All right, everybody. Welcome to the Bald Eagle Podcast. I'm Shawn Cressman. I'm the Bald Eagle. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let me get rid of this banner here. Feel free to comment, and no matter what social media website you're on, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, all that stuff, it'll go straight to my my website here, and I'll respond. I'm going to wave to all these guys on Instagram. If it lets me wave to them. Pressing the button. Oh, well, I tried. Okay, welcome to the Bald Eagle Podcast. Again, I am Shawn Cressman. I'm the Bald Eagle. This is my podcast, and there's some things that some rules that I follow on my podcast. They're important to me. One is the most important, and hopefully you'll appreciate it. But and that number one rule is no politics. So this is your escape, not only for politics, but it's also your home for Eagles news, all things Philadelphia Eagles. I talk about everything Philadelphia Eagles. There are some exceptions, though, and those are part of the other rules, right? First one is no politics. The second one is I don't talk about any personal information. What I mean by that is I won't talk about my personal information, because who really cares? But I also won't talk about the player's personal information. So if somebody buys like a tractor or a Bobcat, like I think Wentz did years ago, if it doesn't affect the game, if it doesn't affect any of that stuff, I won't talk about it. So we don't talk about any of that stuff at all. The third rule, not a big rule, but just as a warning, I'm not censored, so I say whatever I want. So keep an eye out for the kids. All right, we're going to start our new segment. So I'm going to bring up a visual here for everybody watching on everything but Instagram. Because we know Instagram sucks a little bit. I drink a beer every time called Beer with the Birds, and I invite you to join drinking the same beer with me if you'd like. I announce it at the end of each show. I'll announce it now what I'm going to be drinking next time. But currently, I am drinking Yards, and we started off with, and I know you'd rather see my face, and you guys can't see this Instagram, but I started off with Philadelphia breweries. So the first one the first one I'm drinking is Yards Brewery. So I'm going through their beers. We are on their Poor Richard's Spruce Ale. So that's a visual up there for you guys for Instagram. Let's see. There we go. Poor Richard's Spruce Ale. Now, if you guys want to drink with me, grab a Poor Richard's Spruce Ale if you have it. If you don't have it, if you weren't prepared, I'm not going to get mad at you, right? I'm not going to yell at you for not being prepared. However, I'm going to tell you that next week I'm going to be drinking, and I apologize, I don't have the bottle with me for you guys Instagram, but I'm going to be drinking still a Yards. But this time it's the pink sparkling tart berry ale. I can't say it straight because it sounds so girly, right? Pink sparkling tart berry ale. That's what I'll be drinking next week. I know what most of you guys are thinking because I initially thought it too. You're all threatened, or you're all concerned that it might affect your masculinity or your, what people may view you as being masculine. But you don't have to worry about that because even though it is called a pink sparkling tart berry ale, if you have a visual there, and if you're on anything other than Instagram, you can see there's a little pink flag for cancer. So you know how that works. Men can wear pink, and actually men should wear pink to support the cure for cancer. So pink sparkling is next. Currently, we're having Poor Richard's Spruce Ale. Now, I give a little bio of the beer because I'm not a huge beer drinker. That's partially why I started this, is to taste new beers. But I'm going to give you guys an idea of what it's from. And some of this is pretty interesting. So this is the Poor Richard's Spruce Ale. It is based on Benjamin Franklin's, who's on the front of it, original recipe. It's a one-of-a-kind deep amber ale, has barley, molasses, and an essence of spruce. Its locally sourced organic blue spruce clippings are steeped in a kettle to create an ale as approachable and engaging as the man himself. All right. So it's got 5% alcohol. It is, and I already mentioned, it contains local organic spruce tips from Indian orchards, barley, and molasses. So enjoy. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. I can taste I feel like I taste the spruce. All right. So keep an eye out for guys. Go grab a Yards Pink Sparkling, and we'll enjoy that next week together if you weren't able to enjoy a Poor Richard's with me this week. All right, so let's talk football. Frankly, not a lot has happened over the last week. Not a lot of news specific to the Eagles, especially. And we all know that their offseason workouts ended, I think, two and a half weeks ago. All the free agency trades, the majority of them have been done. So we're really just kind of waiting. The next few weeks are going to be waiting. And what are we waiting for? Well, that's our countdown today. We are waiting for training camp to start. Training camp starts on July 27th. In fact, training camp for most teams, 29 teams, will start on July 27th. I think this is the first year that there was coordinated training camp openings. I think that has to do with the collective bargaining agreement stating the latest you can start, right? The minimum amount of time that you need, or perhaps the soonest you can start. I'm not sure which one, but I'm sure there's a deadline, and they all chose to go on the 27th. A lot of teams are having fan events the following Saturday. I think that's the 31st, Saturday or Sunday. I mentioned the 29 teams are going to be starting. The Eagles are included, starting training camp on the 27th, which, by the way, I forgot our countdown. It's 34 days away. So we're just 4 days more than a month. So next week, this time, we'll be less than a month away from training camp. I got a comment here. What do you think will happen to Zach Ertz? I think that Zach Ertz will be traded. I'm hopeful that Zach Ertz is traded, because I don't think he's going to have a meaningful impact on our team. That was a comment from Instagram, which I can't unfortunately blow up. But yeah, I think Zach Ertz will go, and I'm hopeful we can get something for him. Hopefully we can trade him for, honestly, I don't even know what. I don't know what people would be willing to give up. I don't know. We could get a late round draft pick, I guess. But I'm hopeful that we're able to trade him, because I think he's kind of on a descent. I was in favor of him being traded since midway through last year. So two teams aren't starting their training camps on the 27th like everybody else, and that's because they play earlier games. Pittsburgh and Dallas start earlier, July 21st. They're playing the Hall of Fame game on August 5th, so they get a little bit more extra practice time. And then Tampa Bay is allowed to start on July 24th because they're playing the regular season opener, which is on a Thursday, and they're playing against the Cowgirls. So that's why that's why there's 3 instead of 4 teams, right? Go Birds. And after that, so we got the August 5th through 9th is Hall of Fame weekend in Canton, Ohio. Again, the Cowgirls play the Steelers. That's a Hall of Fame game, and that begins the preseason. August 8th at 7 p.m., the Eagles' first public practice at Lincoln Financial Field. Hopefully, you guys have gotten your tickets. The tickets went on sale June 2nd, so we're looking at almost 3 weeks ago, exactly 3 weeks ago, and I wasn't on there on the 2nd. I actually got my tickets on the 5th, and then I got more tickets, I think the 11th. So I don't know if they're still available, but hopefully if you had a chance, you've gotten your tickets for the link. $10 goes to the 100% goes to the Eagles Autism Foundation. And $10 isn't a big deal. And I don't know if there's a limit on how many you can buy. Also, if you've never been to the link, or if you're not familiar with how it works, it's first come, first serve. So I don't know for sure, but I think the tickets might have they might have a seat or a gate number on it, but nobody really pays attention. You just go in and sit wherever you want. In previous years, generally speaking, at the link, there's a level about halfway up. I think it's the 500 level. Above that generally is not open. It's generally they maybe 3/4, half fill the bottom half of the stadium. Now, the one exception was the year after we won the Super Bowl. It was almost packed, and it's great to go to a game and see all those fans. That's normal to see a packed stadium when you're at a game, but for training camp, I think it was real exciting to see all those fans there at training camp, and it's a little more fun. You don't have to pay as close attention. So when those idiot Cowgirl fans show up with their jerseys, the whole stadium, which happened at least in my experience, I forget which one it was, but the whole stadium was yelling that he was an asshole. Which he completely deserved. I mean, if you're going to be, first of all, if you're going to go to an NFL stadium at any time and wear any competitors, any opponent's jersey, you're going to be an asshole. But if you're going to go into Philadelphia with a Cowgirls jersey on, frankly, I think you're putting your life at risk there, and I think rightfully so. So, but anyway, so let's see. So we were at the Hall of Fame game, right? First public practice, Sunday, August 8th at 7 p.m. Second public practice, Sunday, August 22nd at 7 p.m. Both at the link, both $10. Go on to Ticketmaster and get your tickets now if you haven't already. Okay, preseason, first game, week 1, Thursday, August 12th, 7:30 p.m. at home against the Steelers. Week 2, Thursday, August 19th, 7:30 p.m. at home against the Patriots. And then week 3, Friday, August 27th, 7:30 p.m. against the New York Jets in the Meadowlands. And then, of course, because we have 3 preseason games and 17 regular season games, there's actually 2 weeks between preseason and regular season, which I think is, I appreciate it as far as the players' health. So I'm sure they do too. Go Birds. For those that are only listening, if you guys listen to the podcast and you're not watching, every time I say go Birds and there's a pause, it's because I'm drinking my beer. So if you're not sure, that's why there's a little bit of a let's see. Tobias Harris is my father. Ask me any question you want about him. I'll answer it correct. I don't know who Tobias Harris is, Sam Riddle. So I don't have any questions. That was another question from Instagram. Okay. So there goes our preseason. Now, if you watch or listen to the podcast, you'll know that I've been running over our schedule every episode, partially because there's not a lot of happening, but mostly because it's going to help me remember things. It's not going to remember. I'm not going to sit there and be able to rattle off each game from memory. However, I should have a good idea of who we play and who we don't play, and in somewhat of an order, right? I'll know our primetime games, things like that. So I'm going to repeat it for you guys, and hopefully that helps you with your memory too. I don't have the best memory. So regular season starts September 9th. That's a Thursday. They always do the kickoff on a Thursday night, right? And the Cowgirls are at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on NBC. Should be a really good game. I hate the Cowgirls, but they had a great offense last year while Dak was healthy. So that should be a pretty good game playing against the Super Bowl champions, right? So week 1, we start on a Sunday, September 12th, 1 p.m. at Atlanta. No Julio Jones, right? So we don't have to worry as much about him. Not that they don't have other wide receivers. Week 2, Sunday, September 19th, 1 p.m. at home against the 49ers. Week 3, Monday Night Football, September 27th, 8:15 p.m. at the Cowgirls. We've played Dallas in primetime every year since 2007, with one exception. That was 2014 when we played them on Thanksgiving. Week 4, another Sunday game, October 3rd, 1 p.m. at home against the Chiefs. Week 5, Sunday, October 10th, 1 p.m. At home. I'm sorry, the Chiefs are at home at Carolina. So week 5 is Sunday, October 10th, 1 p.m. at Carolina. Week 6, another primetime game, Thursday Night Football. It's October 14th, 8:20 p.m. And that time we were playing at home, an excellent game. As another Thursday Night Football, we are the only team, one of 2 teams that are 5-0 since 2016. It's us and the Seahawks. Go Birds. Week 7, Sunday, October 24th, 4:05 p.m. We are at the Rams. Sorry, the Los Angeles Rams. Yeah, the Los Angeles, not the Raiders. They're the Vegas Raiders, right? At the Los Angeles Rams. Week 8, Sunday, October 31st, 1 p.m. at Detroit. Week 9, Sunday, November 7th, 4:05 p.m. at home against the Chargers. Week 10, Sunday, November 14th, 4:25 p.m. at the Broncos. Week 11, Sunday, November 21st, 1 p.m. at home against the Saints. Week 12, Sunday, November 28th at the New York Giants. Week 13, Sunday, December 5th, 1 p.m. at the Jets. Back-to-back games at the Meadowlands. Week 14 is our late week bye. You know what? I haven't checked to see what other teams' buys are. If anybody knows what their buys are, that'd be interesting. But we have a nice late bye. So, and in addition, after we come back from that bye, listen to the 4 games we play. Week 15, I don't know if they've updated the schedule, but I have Saturday or Sunday, December 18th or 19th, at home against Washington. Week 16, Sunday, December 26th, 1 p.m. at home against the Giants. Sunday, January 1st, week 17, 1 p.m. at the Washington. And then we end the season week 18, Sunday, January 9th, 1 p.m. at home against the Cowgirls. So 4 NFC East opponents in a row. Great opportunity to make up some room if we slacked earlier on in the season, which is very possible with how long we are. 5 of the last 6 games, NFC East rivals. So in that last 6-game stretch, 7 weeks, including the bye, that will most likely will make or break the season, I would assume. I mean, because you have all of our almost all of our games. Let's look. We have the only interconference game that we have before that first 6 weeks is week 3 against the Cowgirls on Monday Night Football. We don't play, then we don't play anybody in our conference until week 12, and then we play the Giants twice, the Washington with the Redskins twice, and the Cowgirls once. So we're set up to if we can, and if we haven't lost too many games, if we can really peak, especially right after that bye, I feel like we lock up our division and a playoff spot. I've talked about this too, just for your own reference, and again, just in case you want to share with your friends and act like you know everything, like I try to do. We have the easiest strength of schedule based on opponents' previous year's winning record. Our opponent's winning record last year was .43. Dallas has the second easiest. Theirs is .452. The Giants are 25th out of 32, 32 being the easiest, so they're pretty far on the bottom at .474. And Washington has the hardest schedule out of the NFC East. They're 15th, was slightly better than 500, .504, which means on average or combined, their opponents won more than half their games, while ours did not. Postseason, which we will be part of, absolutely. We won't be part. Well, let's hope we're not part of the wild card weekend, but I'd be okay if we were. Wild card weekend is Saturday and Sunday, January 15th and 16th, 2022. Divisional playoffs, Saturday and Sunday, January 22nd and 23rd. Championship games, Sunday, January 30th. And Super Bowl 56, Sunday, February 13th at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, home of the LA Rams and the LA Chargers. And then, of course, but the NFL draft next year is April 28th through 30th. Speaking of the draft, not the draft, the combine. The combine is almost always, has been since sometime in the 70s, I think. The NFL Combine started in Indianapolis. I'm looking for a screenshot here because I just screenshotted the text or the test. Okay. No. Yes, 1987. So the Combine has been in Indianapolis since 1987. And since it's been there for, 30 some years, everything that the NFL scouts and everybody that goes to the Combine, everything that they need is within walking distance. Indianapolis is basically set up to host it because they have for so long. But starting in 2023, the NFL is going to start to accept bids from other cities to host the Combine, just like the draft. If you remember, prior to, 16, the draft was always in New York City. I don't know, I forget how long it was there, but for a majority of the NFL's existence, the NFL draft was in New York City. And then they moved it to Chicago, and then it came to Philadelphia right after we won the Super Bowl. And then I think it went to Dallas, and then now next year it's going to be in Vegas, right? So this past year, was it in Cleveland? It was in Cleveland this past year, right? So now it's moving, and the city's bid for the draft, and it's been, the ratings in the draft and the revenue generated from the draft has increased significantly since they've been moving it around from New York. Of course, because think about it, how many people would drive or fly to New York City for the NFL draft? It's a great thing to do, but and they've increased. The other thing about the NFL draft, if you haven't been there, is, and hopefully it comes to a city near you, but it's significantly more than just a draft now. There's you can see the Lombardi Trophy is typically on display. There's usually a pretty big tent that has Hall of Fame stuff in it. So it's not just the draft. There's a lot of other things to do there. So that's what's going on and that is in Vegas, the 28th through the 30th. But going back to the Combine, so starting in 2023, the NFL Combine will no longer be in Indianapolis. It will rotate based on teams' bids. I don't know how. I'm not sure how the NFL determines who wins the bids, because frankly, I would assume that they should give each team, a fair shot at it. So I don't know if it's a raffle or what, but I'll see if I can find more information about that. Speaking of the NFL draft, which we were a little bit there, I'm going to recap our players. If you forget exactly who we took or what position, I do this for the same reason I go over our schedule, for repetition improves memory, right? Now, I'm going to skip first to the 2020 NFL draft, only because that's in the future, right? We actually, as of today, we have 10 picks in the 2022 NFL draft, 4 of which are in the first 2 rounds, 3 of which could be in the first, right? If you guys all remember the trade with Carson Wentz, if he doesn't suck too bad, if he's actually not bad at all, it doesn't matter how well he plays, as long as he starts 70% of the games, we get a first round pick. So currently we have 2 first rounders, one from Miami, one of our own, 2 second rounders, one of which is from the Colts that can become that first, a third, a fourth, 2 fifths, and a sixth and a seventh, right? One of those fifth rounders came from Washington as a result of a trade. I think we traded down in the, I think that was a 73rd pick. We traded from 71 to 73, and we picked up that extra 6th rounder next year. And we did trade a pick for somebody else, but that was 2023, so that doesn't affect 2022. Go Birds. Just waved to all these people on Instagram. So we in the past draft, we drafted 9 players. We started off with, I think, 11 picks, but then we traded and moved up and around, and we left with 9. 6 of those 9 were captains in college, and a majority of the people we drafted met with the Eagles at the Senior Bowl. Of course, we all know number 10 overall, first round, we picked wide receiver from Alabama, Devonta Smith. Round 2, number 37 overall, a center from Alabama, and Landon Dickerson, who, by the way, Landon Dickerson is the only rookie that has not signed his contract. Every other rookie is under contract. Round 3, number 73 overall, Milton Williams, defensive tackle from Louisiana Tech. Number 123 overall, round 4, Zech McPherson, corner from Texas Tech. Round 5, number 150, Kenneth Gainwell, running back from Memphis. Round 6, number 189, Marlon Tuipulatu, defensive tackle from USC. Round 6, 191, Teron Jackson, defensive end from Coastal Carolina. Round 6, number 224, Jacoby Stevens, linebacker/safety from LSU. Round number 7, overall, number 234 overall, Patrick Johnson, outside linebacker from Tulane. We grabbed a couple of undrafted free agents. We did grab Jamie Newman, a quarterback from Wake Forest. Unfortunately, we did waive him recently. And we signed Nick Mullins from San Francisco. We grabbed Jamon Osborne, wide receiver from Texas A&M, as an undrafted free agent. We had Trevon Grimes, a wide receiver from Florida. But he was waived due to an injury designation. So he got injured. From what I understand, I don't know the specifics, but it was his left knee. I don't think it was a serious injury, although he did have a full cast, not a cast, but it wasn't a cast, but it was a brace, not a hard metal brace, but a pretty still sturdy, wrapped up from essentially the mid calf up to his thigh. I'm assuming that maybe it was a meniscus tear. The only thing I could think of that's not serious when you have surgery on a knee, I know the meniscus can be cut out if the cut's too deep, and that only takes that's almost immediate. And then if it's repaired, if you can repair the meniscus, I think it's only an 8-week thing, and it's not major surgery. But anyway, he was put on on IR. He was waived. He made it through waivers, and then we put him on IR. Now, the way that injuries work in the NFL is that technically, when a team puts you on injured reserve, you're on it for the rest of the year. If the injury is significant, you get your paragraph 5, which is your base salary, right? And then, throughout the season, you rehab it. The next season, assuming that you're on a multi-year contract or you have more than 1 year left on your contract, you return to the team like you otherwise would, and play as if you never got injured. You just skipped a year rehabbing. However, if it's a minor injury, let's say it's this injury that's only going to take 8 weeks to heal from, the team can put them in on IR, and they did that because they wanted to avoid having him count for the 90-man roster. So they waived him, and then once they waived him, they put him on injured reserve. Now, if he had stayed on injured reserve, he would have been there for the whole season. He couldn't have gotten off of injured reserve. In lieu of staying on injured reserve, and because it's a minor injury, once he's healthy enough to play football, he falls off injured reserve, and then he goes off to the market. He's released. The whole point of injured reserve is to hold a player while they get healthy and continue to pay them their salary, because if it's a football related injury, you get some protections like that. We've talked about those in the past. However, if it's a small injury, and in this situation where he isn't necessarily a starter, he's a rookie, undrafted even, what they do is they waive you. Nobody claimed him on waivers, so then they put him on injured reserve. He didn't count towards the 90, but he would have never been able to play this year. He'd have been stuck on injured reserve. Instead of keeping him on injured reserve and then releasing him or not allowing him to play, they paid him an injury settlement. So basically what that means is, instead of paying him his salary over the next hypothetical 8 weeks, and then after the 8 weeks releasing him, they release him now, and they pay him what they estimate his injury would the length of his injury in weeks. So again, in that situation that I'm making up about his meniscus and the 8-week recovery, what they would do is they would pay him 8 weeks of his pay, of his contract, and then release him immediately. So what that does is it gives him the money he would have otherwise got, except it gives it to him now. In addition, it allows him to shop for another team so that when he's healthy again, he can sign with another team and immediately start playing. He can sign with another team now, actually. Now, he can technically still, and I'm mentioning this because I was really, out of all the undrafted free agents, out of most of our rookies, I was probably, with the exception of, the high round draft picks like Devontae Smith and all, I was probably more excited about Trevon Grimes than most because he is a big guy, 6'4", 218 pounds. And if you look at our roster of receivers, we don't have a big receiver. The tallest guy on the team is 6'2", and we'll talk about that a little more. So I've looked into, well, if he gets an injury settlement, perhaps that excludes him from coming back to the team that gave him that settlement. And it doesn't. There's just some caveats. So assume again that this is an 8-week injury, an 8-week settlement. So the Eagles can sign him, but they have to wait until that 8 weeks are up, right? So they have to, as if they had him the whole time. Then they got to add 3 weeks to that 8 weeks, and then they can re-sign him. So the Eagles can re-sign Trevon Grimes if they want in 11 weeks, assuming again that it's an 8-week injury. I don't know if there was a benefit to giving him the settlement. If that means, that would suggest to me that they don't have any intention of re-signing him. Because if they thought they might resign him, they could have just left him on injured reserve. Maybe they plan on resigning him in 11 weeks, but they want to give him the opportunity to shop around for other teams. I'm not sure. But there is a chance he comes back. I honestly thought he had a good shot at making the roster because, frankly, and we'll talk about our depth chart later, there's not a lot of there's a big opportunity for somebody to emerge behind what I consider the 3 starters. Okay, so all that was because I was listing our undrafted free agents. So I made it to Jamie Newman, quarterback. He's been waived. Jamon Osben, wide receiver. He's going to be vying for a position. Trevon Grimes, wide receiver. He's been waived. Jack Stahl, tight end from Nebraska. Jaquan Bailey, defensive end from Iowa State. And Coyote Awasaka, offensive tackle from Buffalo. And last but not least, Harry Kreider, center from Indiana. So those are all the guys that we drafted and the undrafted guys that we signed. So now I'm going to skip to, I've gone over all our draft picks. I've detailed their college career. I've talked about their strengths and weaknesses. I've viewed highlights for all the draft picks and the undrafted free agents and for all the people that we signed over the last few weeks, from other teams and things like that. So now we're going to talk about how all those people fit into a depth chart. And of course, because, we're not in training camp yet. Training camp is when people are going to start to emerge as starters or to fall as, as reserve people or special teams guys. But right now, I kind of put them into an order. Honestly, there's not a lot of guesswork, at least at this point. I think the perceived starters have emerged, and I think, if things were to start today, I don't think there'd be a lot of competition at many positions. So today I'm going to talk about offense, and I'm specifically going to talk about quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. So quarterbacks and receivers. Next week, I'll jump to running backs and offensive linemen. The following week, we'll do the defense. We'll start with defensive line and linebackers. And then last, in 3 or 4 weeks from now, we'll talk about corners, the depth chart. So this one isn't really that difficult, especially when you think about some of our starting players. So for example, quarterback, that's a no-brainer, right? We all know, and I'm 100% confident that Jalen Hurts, barring any kind of blockbuster trade for Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, right? The people that have been yelling about being unhappy, Jalen Hurts is going to be our starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. I don't think Joe Flacco, even if he has a good camp, I still don't think that he would. I don't think the Eagles coaches are looking to put him in. And I say that only because Hurts started games last year. So to have a pullback with Hurts and to not allow him to start because Joe Flacco, who had some good years, but wasn't real consistent, I just don't think that would be a good long-term plan. And I think long-term it might hurt Jalen Hurts' confidence and his perception of his relationship with the rest of the team, with the executives really and the decision makers. So I think clearly Jalen Hurts is going to be our starter 100%, barring some sort of significant trade or whatever. Joe Flacco is going to be number 2, and Nick Mullins probably going to be number 3 if we keep 3. Tight end, we'll move to tight end now. Obviously, much more competition and a couple of questions at tight end, but not a lot. We start with Zach Ertz. He's assumed the starter, but somebody on Instagram already asked me, and I don't think he will be the starter. I think that he will be traded. I'm hopeful he'll be traded because I think we could get some value either in a late round pick next year, or maybe somebody that could contribute on special teams or for him. So I think the starting tight end is going to be Dallas Goedert. And I think that's a great, he's one of the better tight ends in the league. So I think, and he can grow. It's only his, second year. So he has an opportunity to make a pretty big jump. Then we have a bunch of other people. We have Jason Kroom. We just re-signed Richard Rodgers. We got Hakeem Butler, Caleb Wilson. And then we have that undrafted free agent, Jack Stahl, and Tyree Jackson. If I were to guess, and now as a side note here, I'm not going to try and figure out the depth chart for special teams. I'm not going to do that shit because that's, I'd have to be at practice for. I have no idea which one of these guys is going to make a better contribution on special teams. So I'm just looking for starters at the position. So for tight ends, Zach Ertz is gone. Dallas Goedert is our starter. I have a feeling Richard Rodgers, given the group that we have here, is probably going to be second string. He has experience. This is his fourth year. Last year, he put up better numbers. He put up career numbers with us. So I think Richard Rodgers coming back is positive. I think he's going to be a second string guy. From there, it's kind of washed out. Jason Kroom had a touchdown last year. So, he went in the games he was in. He's made some plays. Hakeem Butler, Caleb Wilson, Jack Stoll, Tyree Jackson, all kind of meld together, in my opinion. But I feel like Caleb Wilson probably is going to emerge as the third stringer. I have a feeling he's going to be able to make it. I think he's has a little more experience and had some decent games last year. So I think he's got the advantage at third. But this is where training camp in 34 days is gonna clear some of this stuff up. We'll know how good Caleb Wilson is after training camp, and we'll have a much better idea of depth charts after that as well. So now let's talk about wide receiver. Wide receiver isn't there a significantly bigger pool of people here at wide receiver. We've been loading up on wide receivers in the draft, and we have a whole group that's still remaining from last year that they're young and any one of them can make a pretty sizable jump. So of course we mentioned our 10th overall pick in the draft was Devontae Smith. He's obviously going to start. Then we got Jalen Reagor, first draft pick from last year, who had a poor year last year. He most likely will emerge as the second receiver. And then in my opinion, Greg Ward is by far the slot guy. Now, perhaps Jalen Reagor, and there's been some talk that Jalen Reagor perhaps might move into the slot. So maybe he'll spell Greg Ward in the slot. I don't know if he's a better fit, if that's more comfortable for him. But there's been rumors. Now, after those three, Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, and Greg Ward, which from now I'm going to assume I'm projecting as the three starters. We have a group of guys who've been around and had made some plays last year, also made some mistakes, but had some good strings. So we got Travis Fulgham. Everybody remembers him. He had a good a group of games there. I think at one point in the 3 or 4 games that he started in, he had top receptions and top reception yards in the league, only for that brief period. But that's better than nothing, right? We got Quez Watkins, who had a little playing time. John Hightower. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, which has been around for a while, but hasn't really been able to make an impact. Michael Walker, we recently traded for or picked up in free agency. He's a small guy, not a lot of receptions, not a lot of experience last year as a receiver, but primarily a return guy. So maybe we're looking for him to perhaps step up to the slot, and I'll tell you why I think that. We got that undrafted free agent, Jamon Osborne. So that's the whole group. Now, again, it's really hard to pick and choose who do you think is going to make it based on previous year's numbers, college numbers, all that stuff. So what I did is I looked at their height because I keep mentioning this. I want a tall, at least one. And I thought that Kyle Pitts, I thought he was the only one that would have been worth moving up for because of his size. I think he's going to be a great person. I think we're going to have a tough time against him week 1 and the Falcons. I think we're gonna have a tough time covering him, as well as their other 2 receivers that both exceeded. I think they both had over 1,000 yards. So I want size. So thinking of size, Devonta Smith, 6 foot. That's okay. I'm not happy that he's 170 pounds, but that's what it is. Greg Ward in the slot, 5'11". That's perfectly fine with me. However, after that, Jalen Reagor at 5'11", Michael Walker at 5'11". I'm leaning towards those guys, perhaps not doing as well as, I don't know for sure that Jalen Reagor is going to do that well this year. He didn't really show me anything impressive last year, and so he was going to have to make a significant jump. However, we have some taller guys, and the tallest on the team are Fulgham at 6'2", Arthega-Whiteside at 6'2", and then undrafted free agent Jamon Osborne at 6'2". So those guys are the tallest receivers that we have on the roster currently. Now, just to give you some comparison, I talk about taller receivers, Alshon Jeffrey. Alshon Jeffrey was 6'3". Trevon Grimes was 6'4". So if we had kept Trevon Grimes, if he hadn't gotten injured and we hadn't released him, we would have a guy at 6'4". And that's partially why I think he would have been able to make a spot on the roster. I think he would have been able to outplay somebody just solely based on his height and his arm length. But, we may never know. So I'm saying, so we got Devonta Smith and, Jalen Reagor is up in the air, but Devonta Smith and Greg Ward, I think, are solid starters. Watching tape last year, and I've said this a million times, Greg Ward was open very often in the slot. Just wasn't looked at as often as he should have been. Even though I know one of the guys on Facebook mentioned they were purposely targeting him. I know that they tried to at one point, but I don't know that it really went very well. So then it comes down to the other guys. I'm going to predict that that one of the taller guys stays. So I'm saying that Fulgham, Arthega-Whiteside, or Osborne ends up emerging, maybe more towards Fulgham or Osborne. I don't really know a lot about Osborne, but maybe to those two, because I know Arthega-Whiteside has had some time with the team and has had some decent games, but nothing significant. Quez Watkins and John Hightower, they saw some times, but didn't do anything meaningful. Watkins is 6 foot, Hightower 6'1", so that's better than 5'11" or 5'10". And perhaps one of those guys will emerge too. They're all kind of mediocre, so we'll see what happens. I'm another reason why I'm focused on height, and why I'm happy that at least the majority of our receivers are 6 foot or taller. And I only did a 1-year search, right? So I didn't look at the history of all wide receivers. I just looked at last year. Last year, with out of the top 15 receivers based on receptions, only one of them was under 6 feet, and that was Tyler Lockett. He's 5'10". 3 of them, including Tyler Lockett, were under 6'1". There were 2 receivers that were in the top 15 that were 6 feet. I don't remember their names off the top of my head. But so being 6'1" or taller seems to be, the height that I'm not saying that's a cause. I'm not saying that that's the reason, but I'm saying that, perhaps there's a certain height that gives those receivers an advantage over corners, which I think average 5'10". Arm length that gives them an advantage. And I started with receptions because that means they're most likely getting open more often. So out of the top 15 receivers in the league last year, 3 of them were shorter than 6. They were 6 feet or shorter, right? So obviously, height has an advantage. So that's why I'm thinking some of those guys that are 6'2", which we don't have. Devonta's only 6 feet. Jalen Reagor and Greg Ward are both 5'11". We need a taller guy. So I'm thinking that purely on height, they should be able to position themselves to have more receptions. So I thought to myself, well, perhaps that put them in a better position to catch the ball, so they had more receptions. But what about receiving yards, right? Because just because they had more receptions doesn't always mean they had receiving yards. And that's a little different, right? And that makes sense because yards after the catch are probably not easier to attain, but more likely to be attained by a smaller guy because he's quicker and more nimble, generally speaking, right? We're doing some assumptions here. The top 13 of the top 15 receivers based on receiving yards were 6 foot or taller. The 2 exceptions, I'm sure we all know. Number 8 is Tyreek Hill. He's 5'10", I think. But he's fast as any. He's 5'10" and runs the 40 and 4.2, fast as shit. And then DJ Moore from Carolina, he was the 11th receiver. He's 5'11". So again, height, not primarily. I'm sure that height is not the primary indicator of success as a wide receiver, but it clearly is something. There is something there. I still think it's the ability to get to open is easier if you're taller. Again, because of the height difference and the wingspan difference that you have against the corner. So there you have it. I'm hopeful that we can get Trevon Grimes back or somebody else back that's taller than 6'2". just to give Hurts, a second-year quarterback a bigger, better target. But we'll see. So that's my estimated depth chart from here. Keep an eye out next week for we'll do the offensive line and the running backs. Running backs, I think, are going to be exciting. That's what I played, so I enjoy that the most. And then, like I mentioned, the following week we'll do defensive linemen and linebackers, and last we'll do the week after that we'll do the secondary and the just actually linebacker, just the secondary. Okay, so let's move on to Eagles news after that depth chart review. I mentioned this a million times, and I'm going to probably keep saying it until it happens. But effective June 11th, the state of Pennsylvania, the city of Philadelphia has lifted all capacity restrictions, all COVID restrictions in outdoor venues, including mask requirements. So that means that as of today, when training camp starts, when preseason starts, when the regular season starts, as many people can pack into that stadium as possible. They expect stadiums to be filled. The Philadelphia Eagles have announced that they expect the stadium to be at full capacity for the first game of the season, and I expect that to happen as well. Go Birds. Injury update. We talked about Trevon Grimes. He's gone, right? He had some non-serious injury to his left knee. Not exactly sure what it was, but he's gone. Really no other injury news. I'll repeat again, though, that Lane Johnson is 100% healthy. He was taking part in the off-season workouts. Andre Dillard, 100% healthy, participating in off-season workouts as well. So as of today, knock on wood, no real serious injury issues. NFL news. I mentioned before the NFL is going to spend money on opioid alternatives for pain relief. I only mention that because I find it ironic that for the last few years, the NFL has been punishing people, suspending them from games, and everything for cannabis. And one of the alternatives for opioids that they're going to test is cannabis. So similar thing happening in regular life as well, but that's how things work. Another thing that I wanted that the NFL announced, and this is somewhat old, but I did some more analysis on it. They both agree, the NFL and the NFLPA, the union, right, agreed to a salary cap ceiling for 2022 of $208.2 million. There's no floor, so that's the highest it can go in 2022. As a reminder, this year's salary cap 2021 is $182.5 million, which was a pretty significant decline from 2020 when it was $198.2 million. Now, just for your information, and I was actually curious myself, how much did we? So we took a hit in 2021 last year, or this year we're taking a hit in the salary cap because of the virus. It's estimated that the NFL lost $4 billion in 2020 because of the virus. And when I say they lost $4 billion, I don't mean that they usually make $4 billion, or I'm sorry, they made negative $4 billion last year. What I mean is instead of making $16.5 billion, they made $12 billion. That's what I mean. So that's the $4 billion loss. So they're not like they're struggling. It's not like they're out of money. It's just like they didn't make as many billions as they usually do. But every year, on average, the salary cap has increased, and it's been going down, the percentage anyway. But about $10 million a year, the salary cap has increased since around 2013 or 14. Initially, it was increasing at about 8%, then it declined to 7% a few years, and it was 6%, then 7%. The last year was only about 5.5%. But still around 10 million, right? Because the higher the number, the smaller percentage 10 million is. So if we assume that COVID didn't happen, but the shutdowns didn't happen, and there wasn't a reduction in league revenue, and we continue the cap from 2020 at 198 on its current trajectory, the cap would have been $16 million higher. If you look at it, would have been in 2020, the cap would have been roughly 218 million. I'm sorry, 2021 would have been 218 million versus, I'm sorry, the cap would have been 208 in 2021, 218 in 2022. So we're losing about $10 million in salary cap in 2022. And that's not counting every subsequent year. Unless they make a significant jump of 20 or 30 million, they're never going to catch up. And for the rest of the NFL, we're going to be a little bit behind as far as salary cap earnings. But if you add in the other money that they lost in 2021, the players as a whole have lost about about $26 million in salaries. Now, it seems like a ton of money, and it is. However, I didn't add in and I didn't calculate all the contracts that were renegotiated and front-loaded If you remember, oftentimes players would renegotiate contracts because of the salary cap. They would end up making the same amount, slightly more sometimes, but most of it would be front loaded into a signing bonus. So I don't know how much the players actually lost, but as far as salary cap revenue or salary cap limits is about $26 million. And that's, that was based on that significant loss due to the COVID shutdowns. Some other NFL news in reference to roster cuts. Everybody, most people probably know that generally speaking, you had the cut from 90 to 53 after the last preseason game. Currently, the Eagles can hold 90 players. And in fact, they only have to worry about the top 52 for the salary cap. So it's not really, they can keep as many as they want up to that 90, assuming that the top 52 players, as far as compensation, that counter the salary cap are under the 182.5. But now, instead of everybody cutting down after the last preseason game, it's tiered, right? So after the first preseason game, which would end up being weekend, which would end up being August 17th, teams cut from 90 to 85. On August 24th, a week later, after the second preseason game, they cut from 85 to 80. On August 31st, after the third preseason game, is when they have to cut from 80 to 53. Now, not a significant change, not a real big deal, but at the same time, it is, right? You figure, they get to cut 10 people before the final cuts, but those are 10 people on every team, 320 players possible or likely, that can now look for a spot on other teams before those teams have to cut down to 53. So there might be some room for players that maybe would have gotten cut later, or maybe wouldn't have gotten cut. They would have played well in the second and third preseason games that the teams would have held. Now they're on the market, and you can pull them over to your team before you have to cut down to 53 and give them a shot. And another thing, and I should have included this with my initial announcement. Not only does the city of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania have they waived all or eliminated all COVID restrictions, and do we expect full capacity? Roger Goodell said that he expects full capacity at all his stadiums across the league at the beginning of the season. So it's not just a Philadelphia thing. Hopefully the whole NFL is live and in person starting regular season. Okay, so that's the end of the NFL news, the Eagles news, all that stuff. So let's move to the world famous Bald Eagles fact. Go Birds. Now, I mentioned I don't talk a lot about personal stuff, and I don't. I'm going to get a hair personal right now. The Eagles fact that I'm going to talk about the Eagles' 50th season in the NFL. And I'm doing that because this is my 50th episode of the podcast. Maybe I should have started off with that, but this is my 50th episode. So I thought in conjunction with my 50th episode, I would talk about the Eagles' 50th season in the NFL. I generally go season by season. I think I was on like 4 or 5, but I'm skipping ahead just for that. And it actually turns out that their 50th season was somewhat unique. So let's start with the boring stuff. So first of all, the 50th season for the Eagles was 1982. They joined in 33, so that would have made it the beginning of their 50th season. At the time, the owner was Leonard Tose, Tose, maybe it's Tossie, I don't really know. The GM was Jim Murray, and the head coach was Dick Vermeil. I'm sure everybody here knows Dick Vermeil. This was actually his last year. 1982 was his last season. He retired at the end of this year, claiming to be burnt out, which you can't really argue with because it took him 15 years to return to coaching. We all know that he came back in 97 to coach the St. Louis Rams, and then eventually took them to the Super Bowl in 99 and won. Had he won the Super Bowl in 1980 with the Eagles, he would currently be the only head coach to win the Super Bowl with 2 different teams. Not to go, because there's been a handful of coaches that have gone to the Super Bowl with Andy Reid's one of them, right? But nobody has won the Super Bowl with 2 separate teams. Dick Vermeil was one of our better coaches. At the time, he was the best coach we had. We had experienced our most successful period since inception, since we became a team in the NFL. Throughout his 6-year tenure, we had 4 playoff appearances, 1978 through 1981. We appeared in the Super Bowl in 1980, although we unfortunately lost to the Raiders. And in his 6 seasons, he was 54-47, which at that time was the best winning record that we had. In 1982, in our 50th NFL season, training camp was held in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Our home field was still the Veterans Stadium. The Vet was around from 1971 to 2003. That thing was an old beast before when it was demolished. I think there were some upgrades done to it, but I heard rumors before it was demolished that the offices in the stadium had leaky pipes and rust and just was falling apart. The Veterans Stadium hosted the Army-Navy games 17 times between 1980 and 2001. And I mentioned it was demolished in 2004. And in replacement, we have the Link, which I love, Lincoln Financial Field. In the NFL draft in 1982, we only really drafted one meaningful player, and he was very meaningful. The 20th overall pick, first round, was Mike Quick. Other players that were on the roster that year included Ron Jaworski, Jaws, Wilbert Montgomery, one of the best running backs in Eagles history, Harold Carmichael, a Hall of Fame wide receiver. I mentioned Michael Quick, right? He was a rookie wide receiver. And Herm Edwards, who led the team in interceptions that year, one of our corners, and who eventually ended up winning Super Bowl with, I think it was with the Colts he won the Super Bowl. Anyway, the interesting part about the 50th season of the Eagles in 1982 was that it was a strike year. So in that year, the players began a 57-day strike after week 2 of the season. So what the NFL did was they canceled week 3 through 10. They played, when they resumed play in week 11, they played the rest of the games as scheduled, 11 through 16. They added week 17. And instead of, they had originally said, okay, so week 17 is going to be what week 3 should have been. Instead of playing week 3 games, they added intra-division games and mixed things up for 2 reasons. Number one, and most importantly, to increase attendance. The NFL had come off of an abbreviated schedule, so they wanted to increase attendance, get more money in tickets and more viewership from TV. But it also was because they had to balance out the team's home and away games because there was an uneven amount of home and away games. So essentially in 1982, the 50th year for the Eagles, the season was only 9 games. Instead of going by every division winner gets into the playoffs, instead of doing that because of such an abbreviated season, they determined the playoff spots by overall record. Now it turns out that I think there was a team from every division that ended up playing, except for perhaps one, and most divisions had two teams that went in. So it wasn't really that unfair after going by overall record. And this was the first year that a regular season game was played in January. The Eagles struggled this year. Not a good year for them. In 9 games, we won 3, so we were 3-6. In the NFC East, which was in existence back then, the Washington Redskins won the division. They were 8-1. They also went on to win the Super Bowl against the Miami Dolphins, 27-17. The Cowgirls were second in the NFC East, 6-3. And I don't know how many of you guys here remember, but back in the day, it wasn't just 4 teams in the NFC East. There was a 5th. And that was the St. Louis / I don't know if they were in our division when we were the Arizona Cardinals, but they were when they were the St. Louis Cardinals. So third in our division in 1982 were the St. Louis Cardinals. They were 5-4. The New York Giants were 5th at 4-5, 4th and 4-5. And we were in dead last place in the NFC East at 3-6. We were also second last in the whole NFC. The team that had the worst record that year was the LA Rams. They were the last in the NFC. Team leaders that year, Jaws, Ron Jaworski was our head quarterback, of course. He threw 286 passes, completed 167 of them, which is roughly 58.4% for 2,076 yards. He had 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And I mentioned this when I talked about the 1980 Super Bowl, how poor of a player he was that year and how his stats weren't good. And this, admittedly, 58% completing and throwing just as many interceptions as touchdowns. He most likely would be a third stringer, maybe a second stringer on a poor team. But he was a good quarterback back then. Things have changed significantly since he was a starting quarterback. Wilbert Montgomery was our leading rusher. He had 114 rushes for 515 yards. It's a 4.5 yard average. And he also had 7 touchdowns. Harold Carmichael was our leading receiver. Based on yards, he had 35 receptions for 540 yards. That's a 15.4 average. And he threw in 4 touchdowns. And defense stats weren't as easily available as they are now. I couldn't get tackle leaders or any of that stuff, but I did find out that Herm Edwards did lead the team with 5 interceptions as a corner. All right, that was our 50th season, 1982. Do me a favor. I'm part of the currently the PhillyVerse network. I think we're restructuring and thinking of a new name. But look at all of these shows that we got and watch them all. So on Mondays we have the Football Smack Talk show at 6 p.m. Eastern. That is a That features Ryan Reese and Eric Ward. They talk about all football, not just the Eagles, but of course, primarily the Eagles. Mondays at 7:30, we have the Diamond Club podcast featuring John Hunter, Chris Lahiff, and Danny Hart. That's an all Phillies podcast. Wednesdays at 6, of course, you're watching the Bald Eagle podcast, which is primarily all Philadelphia Eagles, hosted by the Bald Eagle himself, Shawn Cressman. Caw, caw. My family has been begging me to do that. I don't know, since I started. Wednesday at 8 p.m., right after the Bald Eagle podcast, is Mixed Sports, 8 p.m., featuring Eric Ward and Jay Landry, all football show. Thursday at 5:30, Tendies on Pattison, featuring Paul Batcho, Jack Griffin, and Chris Lahiff, all Flyers. Also Thursday at 9 p.m., Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, featuring Eric Ward and Joe Barry. That's a wrestling podcast, so listen to that one. They'll tell you all about I don't even know what's going on in wrestling. I don't watch it anymore, but they do, and they'll tell you. And then Friday at 6:30, the Philly Broadcast featuring Ryan Reese and Brian Finnerman. That is a 4for4 sports podcast. So they talk about all 4 sports, but again, primarily Philadelphia. All right. Do me a favor. Go on social media and follow me. Follow me on Instagram. You guys keep following me on Instagram, right? Like, comment on my pictures, right? On all my posts. Follow me on Facebook. Share with your friends. Follow me on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch. Anywhere you can find me, follow me. Look on my podcasts on Spotify, Google Podcast, iTunes, if you just want to listen in the car. And by the way, if you're looking for the Bald Eagle podcast on most of those platforms, you actually have to search the Bald Eagle podcast because I'm not famous enough yet to be the only Bald Eagle. If you type in Bald Eagle, you're going to get a ton of actual Bald Eagles. So type in the Bald Eagle podcast to look for me. And do me a favor, go to TeePublic. There's a link on all the social media. Buy some merch, get some Bald Eagle hats, Bald Eagle sweaters, hoodies, all that stuff. All right. This has been the Bald Eagle podcast. Thanks for listening. Go Birds.